Hi and welcome to Linus Napoleonic Shipyard. So we are on section 3 here of this build of the His Majesty's Brig Sophie, and this is the fictional brig from the Aubrey Maturin series, of course using a historical hull of the Vincejo that was made by my friend. So in the other two sections, if you haven't watched them, in the first section I am doing the prep work and building the masts and so on, measuring things out, and then in the second section I'm actually painting the model up, and now in the third section I'm going to be rigging the ship, and I'm rigging using mostly just the brass wire and sometimes some copper wire, but in this case mostly it's brass wire. So let's get into it, and I'm gonna talk you through it. So coloring the brass wire, I tend to use these acrylic markers. I find it's easiest. They're from AK, so I use the off-white and their rubber black marker, and of course the standing rigging would be tarred, so I'm using this rubber black marker for that. And then just a piece of cloth beneath it, just pulling it through a couple of times just to color the wire in. You're gonna have to, because once you're working these wires and so on, you're gonna knock some paint off sometimes, and so you're gonna have to just go in and fill it in. But just base as a base, really good. And this is another type of wire, very thin wire. That's what I'm going to be using for the running rigging. That's 0.045 millimeters, I think. So very thin. I mean, here in the video I can see, as I'm making the script here for it, you can hardly see it. Like, also without the glasses, like the magnification, I don't see it either. So that's why I made a little bit of a freeze frame here, so you can see what I'm actually working on. But I mean, even if thicker wire would show better, and maybe if you're just using it for wargaming, maybe you just end up using thicker wire for the running rigging, or just this rubber that I was using before, this EZ line. But I do like the look of this. I think it does look better. And here I'm hand coloring in the commissioning pennant and the ensign. And as I said before in the other video, I'm using just the Warlord Games pre-printed ensign, and then just recoloring it using actually I use a blue speed paint because I find that blue pretty good, and then I'm going to end up shading and highlighting it later when I bent it to shape and so on. But just to get a base color in there, like a base blue for this stuff. I'm also going to be towing a boat. So I'm also working on that a little bit. So I'm towing a boat behind, like ready for action. And here I'm painting in this the St. George's cross on the commissioning pennant. Very small, very tiny. That was very hard. I used my finest brush for that. It's also filling out the Union Jack, the section there with the on the blue ensign. And when you're using these speed paints, once again, always clean your brush really carefully, and don't use a brush that you're too careful about, because the brush wears out really quickly when you do it. So I'm starting with the main stays here and so on for the HMS or the Brig Sophie, and just a little bit thicker brass wire. I think I ended up doing 0.3 millimeter for the thickest ones. They might be a little bit too thick, almost as thick as the masts, of course, but there's always in between, like getting it completely right at the scale, and then also having it show, and there being a difference between it and the other diameters of the brass and so on. I found, I mean, I never do it exactly the same, but for this brig I ended up using those 0.3 millimeter for the thicker ones. Just measuring, and then small dabs of glue to attach them. And actually they're just going to be attached with this glue. I'm not using any wire, additional wire on these wings, because they're simulating rope, right? And it holds on really well. The more you have on there, the more stable the model is going to get, right? Because you're actually attaching brass in between the different sections, so it's going to end up being really stable after the fact. And then as I'm moving up, I'm in the standing rigging, I'm using thinner brass wires for that, so I'm going down to 0.25 and 0.15 or 0.2 and 0.15, I think, in diameters, depending on what area I'm doing and what look I want and how visible I want it. And so we're not really rigging the ship. That's what I'm saying here. Like, this is not like you would do with a wood model. I really hope I'm gonna get to building a wood model eventually here, because I'm gonna enjoy that process quite a bit. But what we're doing for now at this scale, or at least what I'm doing, is I'm just creating an illusion of rigging. This is actually not rigging a ship. This is actually just putting wires in the places to make it look a little bit like the rigging. Not exactly, but as close as I can. Also using references, using the book, like rigging period ships that I talked about before quite a bit. And also photos. I find looking at photos from the Vanguard models is really useful. I find their models really good, so I usually look at their models as well when I'm also doing my rigging at this scale, just to get it kind of looking like the rigging they have on their ships. So I was looking at the Vanguard models, HMS Speedy, when I was doing this. So back to the wire again, just getting more wire done, thinner diameters, but black this time. And it's going to be for the bowsprit, just thin dabs of glue again, and then touching them, a lot of patience. You know, it falls off and doesn't look exactly right, and you might have to pull it off again, and you want it, like maybe some of them you want drooping just a tiny bit with gravity and everything to make it look like a living rigging and so on. So reattaching and attaching and just taking your time, looking at references. That's what you need. Look at references, compare your model to the reference, and try to get as close as you can. That's how I recommend going. And then just having a lot of different diameters of this brass wire to be able to build it up. So here we're doing the backstays. And again, careful, just cutting the right length. I used to do this for a long time. I was using this thread from that you get with the models from Warlord games, a little bit thicker and everything. But as time has worn on and the way I've built the masts have changed, I ended up just going with clean wire for those as well. Also because with time the thread, even good thread, I feel like it slackens a bit in some areas. So you get a wire that you want to look taut, slack, doesn't look good, right? So, but with brass wire, it just stays the same. As long as the glue doesn't come off, then you're gonna have something looking taut for a long time. So that's why I've gone over. Of course, honestly, it is a ton of more work to do it this way. Of course, it takes so much longer, and if you're building a whole fleet, like with third rates, maybe this is not the way, unless you're like insane and have insane amounts of time. This may be more for building a little one-offs or small ships that you want to use in single ship actions for B2 quarters or something similar, or maybe some small actions for Black Seas from Warlord games. But I'd rather have a few ships that I'm really pleased with, that I know is built to the best of my ability, than a whole fleet of ships there. But that's just me. I never can go back. Like once I gone forward, it's hard to go back. So always trying to improve and get it better. I really think I got this model looking really well. I mean, there's mistakes made, like the main yard and everything, you know, after the fact. But I never go back and change things once I'm completely done, because I think it's very hard to do. You're gonna pull things apart and it's not gonna look wonky, and you're not gonna get the right look again. So you know, you have one shot. I also wanted the spanker, the boom and the gaff there to be a little more living, so they're like out over the side there. I'm also going to have the spanker sail brailed on this one, so it's like completely ready for action. That's actually my friend that taught me that. I mean, I'm learning things all the time with these things. Like they would actually braille their spanker when they were going into action. Of course, because it's a large canvas area that's going to be full of holes if you have it there. And if you're very close, maybe you don't need it exactly for maneuvering in that moment, so you're going to braid it up to protect it. So here we have the Sophie with most of the standing rigging in place, and you see already it's looking more like a living ship, like a real ship with all that rigging. The standing rigging, of course, is just half the story. So we're on the sails here, and these are made from silk span, as I mentioned earlier, and it's 2 layers, and in an earlier video I glued them together, so the 2 layers, and then I drew it on with pencil, and then I added some details on the sails with some gray fine liner marker, really thin, I think 0.3 millimeter fine liner marker, or 0.5 millimeter fine liner marker, like just the little bit of sections of the sails and so on. Also the sails that I'm gonna furl or reef, I actually use silk span for all the sails. I don't use putty or ready-made or 3D printed anymore. I actually fold the sail, kinda. I mean, I know I'm not doing it right, because it's very hard to get it to do it right in this scale, but it doesn't make it fold right. But I try more, again, for a look, like I want it to look right more than that it is completely right. So some corrections, doing like filling in with the pen, this acrylic marker pen, get the details right, and we are ready for the core sail, the 4 cores here. So just with a pincer, cyanoacrylate glue, and making sure that you don't get it on the finger and get the whole sail stuck to your finger and rip it apart. Silk span is very durable to this type of abuse, but not super durable, and you get it stuck to your finger, you might break it and you're gonna have to start over. So be careful. I mean, I use a pincer, my finger, cyanoacrylate glue, and water, just to fold the sail and put the reef in it. And also doing it this way, I make sure that no 2 sails look alike, like between ships too. Like when you get those 3, of course, again, you're making a fleet, do Warlord Games plastic mast or Turner 3D printed masts, like resin masts, with those reefed courses already on there, and you're done. You just have to paint them. But for me, since I put so much time into everything else, I figured I just put the time into do everything in silk span as well. So also the ones that I'm folding up like this. So here we are on the sprit sail, one of the sprit sails. I think it's called sprit sail. Sometimes the names, it's words that I don't normally use, and in a language that I don't normally use. So this is a double trouble. But also, I think doing it this way, I think it looks really nice, especially like right now they're raw, so I just glue them and put them on there and so on. But then once you get some shading in there, some highlights on them and so on, they do look really nice, the silk span. So this is the way I'm gonna keep doing it. For a while I was using papyrus, but I moved away from papyrus to silk span because I feel like I have even more control with the silk span. This is papyrus being more a natural material, so there's more imperfections in it. I really like the tone on the papyrus, like this warm sail color, and I might go back to it for some builds, but for now I'm gonna be using the silk span. So here I'm brailing the spanker sail here, and getting it in place with some glue, and then just shaping, patient. Make sure that you don't get your pincers stuck to the glue or your fingers stuck to glue and rip the sail apart or pull things apart and so on. Just go slowly, take your time, and, you know, pull out sometimes. If you're using those glasses that I use with the magnification, sometimes it's good to just have a break. And here is some soft tone and some gray wash that I'm using with a lot of water for basically putting a tone, like some aging of the sail. And of course them being see-through, so there's going to be sections where it's going to be showing more through where I don't paint, and I'm going to add some photos. I think here and also at the end where you can see I'm holding the whole ship up to the window, and you can see how the light is shining through the actual sails because they're not that thick. The silk span it's durable but not that thick, so it does let some of the light through, and I think that effect is really nice. So that's why I've gone to the silk span. Again, it's my friend's idea to start using silk span. Very thankful for that, because I feel really enhanced that part of the game, so to say, like the making of the sails. Just building it up layer for layer. I use a light table to make sure that I have the same pattern on the front and on the back of the sail when I drew it in and so on. I did that earlier on. And then deciding which side is going to be bowing a little bit and which side is going to be the opposite, and how it's going to look, and where the shade and where the weathering is going to be and so on. Sometimes knocking some stuff loose when you're working, so you have to glue it back in place. And the camera work, not completely happy with it. I think you get a really good idea watching this whole video, if any of you have the patience to watch this whole video of the whole process and the details, and just ask away in questions in the comments if something is unclear, if you want to know more about it. I'm going to try to answer every question you have. But I hope, like, showing the whole process like this, of course large file and everything, but before I've just done it in photos, and maybe I take some steps for granted and people want to see like exactly how it's done. So, but if I would do that without speeding things up, as I said, I don't even want to know how many hours I spent on this thing. I mean, even speed it up, this is altogether like almost 2 hours of video. So this is how the model looks at this point, and time to put some highlights into the sails. And again, I tend to use the acrylic marker. Sometimes I use a brush, sometimes the acrylic marker. It has a fine enough point, I feel, to be able to work directly with the pen. And I really like those acrylic markers because they have a nice feel to them when you're working them. So good idea to have some of those. See here I'm highlighting on the sails that are brailled or furled or reefed. Just watch out so you don't dip it on somewhere that you don't want to. And if you do, then like I did, then you just have to go in with the black and fill it in. So we're nearing the end of the build. So here I started to put in a little bit of the running rigging. Over time, I do running rigging many different ways. Maybe I use a whole length and then I put a bend on it like I did now. But when the ship is really small like this, it is a real hassle to do. So then I decided just to split most in two. So I do left side or like starboard and port side. So one wire for each side, because it's easier, and then you can just cut them off and so on. And also many times you can leave the length longer, as you can see here. So it's just sticking over, and then you let it dry in place with the cyanoacrylate glue, and then you can just cut it after the fact. Some more shading, a little bit darker shading in some areas, just going along the way as you see. You need some upgrade some stuff to do to make it look better. Close up of the ship so far. And then this fine little needle scissor just to cut the things off. So time to add in the rest of the sails, the ones that are drawing. And it's just 2 sails on each mast. Be very careful when you cut to have a good sharp scissor. I tend to do a little bit of pre-work on them with the back of a brush, really, just to get some shape. When they were drawing pretty straight. Look on most of the historical paintings, so because they're under tension like that, so but a little bit of shape to them, just not a flat piece of paper, make them look a little bit alive. It's always a good idea. And also a little bit checking the fit before you actually put the glue on, because once they're completely glued, they're glued. And be careful when you do this so you don't get your fingers stuck on the sail when there is glue there, because you can easily pull the sail apart that way. They're durable, like silk spans, very durable, but if you pull the sail apart with glue, then it's messed up. I've done it quite a few times with them to the on camera. But this time around I actually managed to succeed. I do feel like the masts were quite a success on this, even if the main yard was too small. The sails actually look pretty well, look very brig-like type of sails. So I think I got the measurements, like the heights and so on of the yards and so on, pretty good for the size of the hull and for the Sophie and for the references I was using. Also, again, patience, like use a pincer to bend them into shape and so on. And then the cyanoacrylate glue to get them sticking to the yards, or just below the yards. And again, you're not really putting on sail, you're putting on small pieces of paper on 1/700 scale, trying to make it look like sail. So it's good to remember that. So better going for something that looks right than something that is completely correct, I feel like, at this scale at least. So, but once they're on, it's very satisfying, this step. So once you're this far, there's not much that you could do to really fail. But like, you at this point know if you kind of succeeded or not. So this is the model so far, with the sails on and the running rigging on. Here are the rat lines from Atlantic's models, and these are the I think they are 1/600 scale to 1/700 scale rat lines, and again using acrylic marker is to paint in the shrouds there, and then I'll get the blocks with some brown speed paint at the end. I think this looks pretty okay for the scale. Just a little bit of patience. Was a little bit off the camera here for the most part, but you see what I do. Just a little bit with the acrylic marker, easier than with the brush. So again, those are super useful. I haven't used them for a very long time. They're a recent addition to my armory, but they're a very useful addition. They save a lot of time and also save a lot of paint because you don't have to mix the paint up. And they're not super expensive either. So if you have the chance, get them. Won't be sad. At least the rubber black and the off-white is really good to use. I have a few different ones that use to different stuff. So. And they dry pretty fast too. They're acrylic, right? So they dry pretty fast. Running rigging. We're on the running rigging, and this is almost the final step. So this wire is very thin. It's 0.05 millimeters or even 0.045 millimeters. So basically almost feels like almost like working with hair. The good thing about the brass wire is that it keeps its shape really well. I mean, even in the running rigging, I don't want too much sag in that. Of course, there would be some sag somewhere, and of course, I do bend it a little bit, as you can see here. But it also keeps that shape really well. So you can work it quite easily, put some bends in there as you need them, and so on. So for this stuff, to get it really exact, I recommend it. Like this full length and then a bend, I've done that before, and it's easier on bigger ships. But when I'm doing the small ships like this, like I said, I didn't find it worked that well. So as you can see here, I ended up just cutting it in half. So doing the starboard side and the port side by themselves, and just cutting the wire off. I think it's a good idea for when you do it. And usually what I do is I'll work my way from the back, top to bottom, and then the front, top to bottom, or the fore, top to bottom, and then I'll do the main top to bottom at the end, or maybe the main and then the fore. But usually start with the mizzen if there's a mizzen mast. There's not on a brig, but so start from the back because it's easiest. And again, using references like books, like this book, Rigging Period Ships, I find it very useful. And also just looking at like scale models, like Vanguard models, is a really good idea also to give you an idea how the rigging is looking. And then how much you put in there is really up to you, like how detailed you want it. So you see here I started putting in some of the running rigging. That's going to be the white wires, and then I'll add in more as I go. And patience. Cyanoacrylic gel, cyanoacrylic glue, acrylic marker, and the right diameter with brass, and a lot of patience, and you can't really go wrong with this. And also practice makes perfect, right? I find it much easier than I used to. I know how much glue I need, so I can put smaller dabs of glue. I have this like not one time, but replaceable tips for the gel for the glue bottle as well. So that I make sure that I'm not pouring out too much glue at the time, because then you get those shiny dots that really don't look right. So be careful when you do it. And if you do get too much on there, immediately get some trash brush or some tiny piece of rag or something and lift that glue straight off, because if it dries like a blob, it's going to be very hard to get it off. That's the scissor again, and it's very useful for a lot of stuff here. A little bit of a close-up, like a photo, just to show you, because it doesn't show so well on the video, like all the details. Like right now we're working with some really fine stuff, and you see how useful that scissor is, just to cut it off close to. And again, using references all the time here in between to make sure that I kind of get it looking right. impression of rigging, not the actual rigging, but making an impression of the rigging, so that it kind of looks good at scale and for photos and so on. And really happy with this, because more or less, you know, unless my friend changes his mind, and I don't think he will, like this is going to be the only hull that I have of this model, right? So this is a one-off, and this is not for someone else, it's not a commission, I just made it for myself, for my fleet. And of course I'm going to, I know Turner has a hull, and I used that for a diorama in the past of the El Gamo, and I guess I could do some changes to that hull maybe, and then try to make the Cacafuego, because I would really like to play maybe a beat to quarters with the encounter between the Sophie and the Cacafuego, now that I have the Sophie model, even if he carries a little bit too many guns. But I'm not going to think about that once I play, I think. So here I'm using speed paint, like this leather brown speed paint, just filling in the blocks on the shrouds there. And just patience, you want the white to still show in the middle, so some more detail, correcting the crew. So you always tend to knock some crew over, and sometimes here at the end I did forget to film some steps. So here you see I've attached the ensign. It's not finished paint, I mean it looks quite crude at the moment, but that's because I bent it and so on. I'm going to correct that with paint later, but I think it looks pretty good with that brailed spanker sail, so then you can see the ensign much better. And then I have those, the boom and the gaff, they're like this, like sweeping out over the side there to make it look a little bit more alive, and to have the ensign streaming on that side as the ship is turning. I think that looks kind of okay. And also here is more like a break, like I'm filming it, but also it's me looking at the model, thinking if I've missed something, if something looks wonky, if I need to fill in some paint somewhere and so on, if some of the standing rigging is looking right, the right diameter and so on, or if I knocked over some crew or so on. Yeah, and recommend Atlantic models for the standing, for the rat lines. Really good idea. I've used them like for 2 years now, I think. Maybe it's 3 years now. This hobby is, I'm not very old in this hobby. I always loved ships, but I was more like Swedish 17th century ships, like the Stora Kronan and the Dano-Swedish wars and so on. But since my brother gave me Black Seas for Christmas a couple of years ago, this has been one of my main hobbies, and I feel myself that I actually come quite a way since I started, and my models are looking much better, and maybe I'm at the point where, and I'm hoping that I soon will be able to do some diorama in a bigger scale. Time to move up in scale, and I've been eyeing, of course it's all about budget, but I've been eyeing wooden models from Vanguard models, maybe get into building my first larger scale wooden model as well. Just the pleasure of building something more accurate to what the real thing is in the more accurate materials. I do really like building things at this tiny scale, like the miniature scale. It really goes well for me. I mean, or I really like it, I enjoy it, and I like to creating, because each little ship becomes like a diorama in itself, right? And I get to work with all these little details, and my brain quite enjoys it. See, I'm just attaching the rat lines here, like, and every step takes a long time. Every step can be very frustrating and so on, but also the reward for like getting it right and getting it looking right is it's very nice. And of course I get a lot of feedback from you guys as well, and it is, believe me, very valuable. It becomes a little bit of a drive, because not like vainglory or something. It's just I know that people are watching the stuff I do and taking inspiration from it, like I did from others, and then I get to see people make their own models, and they're looking better and better as well. So I do feel like maybe I'm learning stuff, and then I'm spreading what I learned to others, and that's very enjoyable. I mean, my main profession is teacher, so I guess it spreads over to my hobby as well. I really enjoy yeah, and of course all the contacts I get through the hobby as well. So I mean, I've met a lot of people through this. I'm also like my friend who sent me the hull for the Sophie. That would never have happened without this. So, and it's like a one-off experience to build a ship that I've been thinking so much of. Like the Brig Sophie has been, I mean, I don't know how many circumnavigations I have, like both reading and listening to the books. I have them as audio books in my car. I listen quite often to them, to be honest. So, without really remember every detail. I guess that's my brain works that way. So I got a little sidetracked there. We're doing the last bits here. The rat lines are on, and I'm working the running rigging. And again, it's another step. There's a lot of work, and on these later models that I'm doing, I'm putting in quite a bit of the running rigging as well. You need to watch out. You don't want to make it too because you could, like, if you're not too very careful, it could look a little bit too busy or a little bit messy at this scale, I think. So think about which lines you really need, like to describe the running rigging without maybe putting every little block in there. And also that's a good point, the blocks at this scale, because I got some questions about the blocks. So blocks are actually just tiny dabs of cyanoacrylate glue in the right point, then painted white, and then brown for the blocks. So that's how I do them. So also if a line or a rope splits, that's where I put a tiny dab of glue, and then if there was a block, I'll paint it brown. And again, this scissor, very useful to cut off the length if they get too long. And pliers, like AO, my clumsy fingers are way too thick to manipulate all these tiny details. So I need a pair of good pliers to get to all the areas that I want to glue. So almost ready, more of the running rigging in place. See some wire not cut here, a little bit overexposed I see here as I'm watching, but let's just have to be, I have better pictures later. And also, yeah, again, not gonna comment too much new on is the idea of running rigging. So touching him in the right place, looking like it looks right. It's hard to fail at this point as well if you've gotten this far in a build. If you follow this and maybe you build your own, because at this point the model is pretty stable, because every little brass wire you put in there attaching to another section is going to make the whole thing more stable. So especially small ship like this, the mast gets quite stable once you have all those wires in place, I found. And if I ever do this again, I'm probably going to work more on where I have the camera placed, so you can see what I'm doing better. And maybe just film shorter sections at the end of each thing I'm doing, so that you can see what I'm doing without having to see everything I'm doing. But I'm trying different formats and see which works best and which you guys feel is most useful. And I have been asked several times to show an entire build. So that's what we're doing here. That's why we're doing these 3 very long sections of a video here of the same model and the same build. It's because some of you really wanted to see the whole thing, like everything I do. So most of the process is here. I haven't cut almost anything away. Looking at the Speedy from Vanguard models again, like, oh yeah, it's supposed to look like this and so on, like looking at different sections that I want in there, like a further look and everything. There was the stern area that I wanted to look a certain way, so I put that in. And then I talked to the gent that made the model, and he told me that on the rails there, on the quarter deck at the back there, those are actually hammock nettings, so there should be some tarps over them and then hammocks inside. So I decided, even if it was really hard to do at this point, because basically I've gotten too far in the build to really fill those in, I decided to do it anyway with some rice paper I'm using here for this. It turned out pretty okay. I mean, a little bit like Aubrey would put it, all a who, but maybe it was like more fast done, or maybe there was a hit on it or something. So I mean, if you don't look too close, it looks fine. And also anchors, I'm using photoetch anchors for this one, because even 3D printed anchors, they tend to look almost a little bit too thick and too large on a small model like this. And I had some photoetch anchors over, so I decided, okay, I'm going to use those. And now I'm working on the ensign and the pennant, just putting in some highlights and some shades, like making the light hitting the ensign and the pennant more alive, and getting some variations in there. Just was looking a little flat, so I decided we needed, or usually I do this at this point as well, so maybe not this much, but just putting some tones in there, some highlights, some shades to get it looking like a living, or like it's moving in the wind. Insane how big those pennants were, really. I have a video on ensigns and pennants, so if you haven't watched that, maybe I'll put a link here and give that a watch. I was learning a lot about ensigns and pennants and looking into it, and then I figured, okay, let's make a video of it. So there's an entire video on ensigns and pennants, and at the end of that video there is actually the build as I was building that HMS Victory model that had all the decks and everything inside. So and these are basically what we're doing now, is some of the final touches, working on that tarp, on the hammock netting, and fixing, like maybe highlighting some areas I had forgot before, doing some cleanup, getting some details just right. Here I'm working on the blocks and so on. So the model is more or less done. It's not mounted on its base yet, but it's more or less done at this point. I decided later to have a little bit more running rigging, if I don't remember wrong, as I'm watching this. Tip is, at this stage, take your time, like really, because then it's so annoying to find something later that were completely off and that you didn't want. So time to mount it. Be careful. You see there's a lot of little wires that you, if you really press them, could still snap. Cyanoacrylate is my go-to. And I also, before, I forgot to show that in the first video, but I did give the ship some heel already from the beginning, because I wanted quite a bit of heel in the Sophie. So she was reacting to turn and to the waves and the wind. So that's why I did her with that heel. And so this is the little boat that I wanted towing, and I didn't like the color of it as it was, so I decided to correct it a bit. And here I'm using the sea texture on the top, just with an old brush. Be careful to don't get anything on the model where you don't want it, because this stuff is pretty hard to get off once it's on there. And it's quite easy to accidentally get too much up on top. So first what I'm doing is I'm filling in around the ship before I really work in any wake or wave patterns and so on. And this stuff, it dries, I mean, when it's thick like this and I'm working it, it looks a little white, but it dries completely transparent if it's not a too thick layer. And then what I'll do after that, and I show that, is I'll go in with another type of texture that is an opaque white and pick out the crests. So that's the way I do it. And what this does is actually it's kind of scatters the light as it passes through this semi-transparent base and gives the base some depth. Even if it's a really flat 3mm thick base, it still makes the light travel different through there with those different facets. So it looks really nice. And you see I did some waves, a bit choppier, shorter waves, and then the Sophie's traveling across them. And also I put the wake a little bit like turned, so that she's actually not going straight ahead, she's like turning. So again, the camera not exactly centered, but I hope you get an idea of what I'm doing. Like I'm building up layers, a little bit thicker in some areas, thinner in some areas, and just this step is important if you want the ship to look more alive, I guess. So there we go. So it has dried. And here I start working. I'm just going to show a little bit and then I'll show you how it looks when it's done. But very thin brush, and don't worry, you can use your nice brush for this, it's easy to wash off. And then just pick out the crests. If you want it to look a little more choppy, then pick out more crests. If you want it to look calmer, then just pick up a tiny bit of the wake or the side of the ship, and then it looks like a calmer sea, right? So the more this white crest or white tops you have, the wilder it looks. I think it turned out nice for this model. The sea is just turned out just the way I wanted it to, more or less. And what you're looking here at is a more or less finished model as well. There is a few more things that I did before we got to this final stage. But that's it. This is His Majesty's Brig Sophie with the commander Jack Aubrey. I hope you agree. It's another quite successful build at this scale. I do appreciate all the feedback I get on these models, and if you have any questions whatsoever on this build that I didn't already answer as I was going through this, just ask in the questions below or in any of the other videos that I released previously on this ship. Very enjoyable. And also these smaller unrated ships, even if I build them with this scratch built masts and all this detail, they do go quite a bit quicker than a frigate. Maybe because there's just 2 masts and the frigate has 3, and that extra mast adds some time. And of course the last few times when I've been building ships, I've built two at the time, right? So I had the Lively and the Pomont, and then before that I had the Surprise and the Acheron. So I was building 2 at the time, and of course that takes longer as well. But this build took a little shorter than I was thinking it was going to take, and I think I'm actually very pleased with the result. And as I said earlier, can't wait to use her in a game. Might have to wait until I have an actual Cacafuego to put her up against, but maybe she'll enter some game under another name, so not Sophie but something else, maybe HMS Vincejo. Next up I do have the Santa Ana, and that's going to be hull from Turner Miniatures. Turner Miniatures, if you haven't checked them out, they are commercially available, so you can just either buy the file from Turner and then print it yourself. My other friend here in Sweden actually recently got I think he has a 9K, 8K printer, so he's also started to print his own hulls from Turner for his builds. He's making a lot of Russian ships and so on, like the Archipelago fleet and everything, like in our last battle report. And of course, then this hull is not a Turner hull. This is a hull that my friend made from the original plan of the Vincejo, and then printed in 16K. But the Santa Ana, one of the next I'm going to build, that's going to be a Turner hull. So, but I'm going to build it out with the masts and everything, all the little details, and that's a commission that I'm making. And I'm also going to do another lively. I'm not going to be taking any photos per se of that, because I already did that of a lively build. But hopefully an even better lively build this time around. And those are going to be the 2 last commissions for now, I think. Because after this, I would just like to have some time, even if it's really nice with commissions, just to have some time to focus on some more stuff for myself and dioramas. And I do have a lot of hulls that I got from my friend. So I have an Endymion that I would really like to do, like the early Endymion, when she had that more baby puke, brighter, wider streak. And then I have the late Endymion to do as well, as she looked during the War of 1812, with that more black hull. So I have a few models that I have still to do, and I'm actually looking forward to it quite a bit, and also to build some stuff for myself. A little bit of pressure. I did wait very long time for the Santa Ana hull, so that got a little bit delayed, that whole build. And that is when you don't have your own 3D printer, then you have to wait. So maybe it is something I should also look into eventually here. Although maybe now that my friend Marcus, he has a 3D printer, I can get some files and then print them on his printer. That might be a way going forward when it comes to making commercially available hulls, of course. But I hope you enjoyed the build. I know I was a little bit ranting. It is a long time to talk about something. I'm dividing this into 3 sections. This is the 3rd section, of course, but I did record the whole audio in one sitting. Long time to talk to the TV. But I hope you found it useful. I hope you found some stuff interesting, something that you can use in your models. And as I said, any questions, drop them below. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and maybe take a look. I do have some merch. I think might not be the nice. I might remove that again. But there is some. I have some T-shirts, some mugs, and that's actually drawings made by me that are on those things. So I do have an Indefatigable and a Shannon that are available as prints. Yeah, and I guess next one might be a battle report, I think, or maybe a build log of the Santa Ana. Maybe the first rate would be nice to have a little bit of build. I know I built the Santa Ana before, but now I'm going to build it out with all the extra little details. So maybe I do a little report on that. We'll see. I'm also researching some stuff at the same time, so I don't know what's going to come out first. If you haven't tried any of the things I've done, and if you're playing war games, then you know there is the Beat the Quarters companion app. I did some updates to that lately. So if you're playing a new game of Beat the Quarters, then maybe take a look at that app. There's a video where that's linked. And also I have actually a friend in the community that is helping me, has actually jumped on board and is helping me with this historical ship fleet builder app for Black Seas. We're also working on some updates for that, and with printable ship cards. He had a really good system for that we're incorporating into the app and so on. So there's will be different ways for you to like select the ships that you want in a battle, and then just print out your fleet on an A4 where you can fill in some notes, and there is like this little circles that you can X out as you're losing ship points, and so on. But I guess that was that for this one, and so for the third time today, but maybe for the first time for you, I wish you all fair winds and following seas.